And thank you so much for inviting me to talk about a topic I really love and on which I spend a lot of time because I'm totally fascinated by this kind of source. I mean, Inquisition trial. I'm also a food lover, and I also belong from a cook family of cooks. And that's why food is also relevant to me. And the relation between food and um, religious practices is what motivated me to go ahead in my research. Today, we're going to talk about Sephardic food practices in Inquisition trials. And so it's a theme that that was not, in fact, this topic was not my first topic when I started my research, because when I was doing my PhD, I was working on recipes written in Arabic and Jewish practices in the Iberian Peninsula. So, the time was a bit different because it was in the 12th century. Nevertheless, when I finished my PhD, I decided just to go forward and to continue my research, and also to work on the diaspora and not only on the Jews of Spain. Because everybody knows that when people move, food moves. So I have to extend my research in space and time. So Sephardic food practices in Inquisition trials, this is a theme that defines the space and time context. Indeed, we're going to talk about Sepharad. So Sepharad, everybody knows that this refers to Spain, but it's also going to refer to Spain and Portugal. We're going to talk about Inquisition. So obviously the Inquisition that were working in Spain and Portugal. So in Spain since 1478. We are not going to talk about Inquisition trials at the end of the 19th century, but it was just a quick reminder that the Inquisition in Spain only officially ended in the 19th century. So we're going to talk about Inquisition trials, Spanish Inquisition trials that dates back to the end of the 15th century and the very, very beginning of the 16th century, 15 and 16. Inquisition in Portugal started a bit later in the first third of the 16th century. We are also going to talk very briefly about the relevance of the diaspora. To consider the diaspora, we have to consider the diaspora within our history, Jewish Sephardic history. That's why we are also talking about the Sephardic food practices in Mexico after the discovery of the new continent. The question is here, what was the role played by food and food practices through the Inquisition trials? So first of all, obviously, it would be a bit curious to talk only about the food practices of the Sephardim since the 15th century. That's why I just want to give a very quick reminder. So when is the first reference we have concerning the existence of a Jewish cuisine? I mean, a cuisine which was known and renowned as a cuisine which is different from the cuisine of the others. So a cuisine for the Jews, made by the Jews and for the Jews. I use the word Jews, Jews of Spain, because we are before 1492. So since this date, we are going to use the term Sephardim, but before they are the Jews of Spain. So the first reference concerning the existence of a cuisine made by and for the Jews is found in the first cookbook written in the West. It's a cookbook that dates back to the 13th century, and it was found in Andalusia, so in the south of Spain. It's an anonymous cookbook written in Arabic, and it is the only one and the oldest one in the world that contains explicitly Jewish recipes. I mean, in the title of this book that contains 462 recipes of dishes, there are 6 recipes that contain the word Yehud or Yehudi, I mean Jewish, in the title of the recipe. So this first evidence is very important to us, and we have also to consider this to understand the evolution of this cuisine or those food practices of the Jews. So this cookbook, which is anonymous and also bears the name of the Kitab al-Tabir, which in Arabic means Kitab in Arabic means the book, and Tabir means the cuisine. So in this cookbook, you are gonna find, so which dates back to the 13th century. You have only 6 explicitly Jewish recipes. This does not mean that there are no other Jewish recipes. There are more than 6 Jewish recipes, but those ones are explicitly Jewish. So you have almost 70% of entrails, vinegar, and rosewater. You have a bit more than 80% of onions, mint, cinnamon, salt, and pine nuts. And all the recipes, all the 6 recipes contains oil, eggs, meat, nuts, and cilantro. This is important because when we are going to work on Inquisition trials that date back to the late, the end of the 15th century, the question is there like a transmission of those Jewish food practices that dates back to the 13th century? And the answer is yes. And this is just very briefly, these are the photos of the 6 explicitly Jewish recipes from the Kitab al-Tabir. So the cookbook, the anonymous cookbook. So as you can see, there are 2 recipes made with chicken. In the first one, it's a whole chicken, and in the second one, the chicken is cut. As you can see, the first name is a Jewish dish of chicken, and the second Jewish dish of chicken. In fact, it's despite the similarity between the titles, there are 2 different recipes. You have also 2 recipes made with partridge. One is called Jewish partridge, and the other one a Jewish dish of partridge. And the 2 other recipes are first a stuffed buried Jewish dish, which it's like a big cake made with layers of eggs, like omelet, stuffed with meatballs and lamb. And the last one is a Jewish dish of eggplants stuffed with meat. And it's obviously, so there are eggplants that are, you use the flesh of the eggplant and you mix this with lamb, and you need to stuff the peel like of the eggplant to recreate this dish. So this is interesting to consider because those 6 explicitly Jewish recipes are going totally to disappear from the Inquisition trials. So I did not find any mention of those 6 explicitly Jewish recipes that dates back to the 13th century in Inquisition trials, written in Portuguese or written in Spanish, whatever, in Catalan, from Spain, Portugal, Italy, and Mexico. It's like they totally disappeared. Nevertheless, there are recipes that were non-identified as Jewish in this cookbook from the 13th century, but we know like that there is a recipe called mufleta, which is in fact, mufleta is what the dish that Moroccan Jews used to prepare to celebrate Mimuna at the end of Passover. So this recipe, for example, was a Jewish recipe, but in the 13th century, it was not identified as a Jewish recipe, but it was, obviously, because it's exactly the same process, same recipe. So just wanted to check with you about this, because this is very important to understand what we are going to find in Inquisition trials. So the Inquisition trials allows us to understand the evolution and the perception of Jewish food through the judicial sources of the Spanish Inquisition. So obviously the Inquisition trials are not the main source to understand and to learn from the converso or crypto-Jewish practices. So everybody knows about this. But so when we use the term of converso or crypto-Jewish people, we are talking about the Jews who officially said that they converted to Christianism, but in fact, they continue to practice their religion. So Christian cookbooks written under Christian domination and also literary works are also part of the sources that can and should and maybe must be used to understand the food and the cuisine of the Jews during this period. Nevertheless, here we are going to focus on Inquisition trials. Inquisition trials are one, I think, to me, it's the main source to understand not only the food practices of the converso, but also the context of Spain, if this trial has been written in Spain or whatever. It's very important because it helps us to understand this political and religious and social context of the country. So Inquisition trials are works as an ideological instrument of the power. I mean here, so the Catholics, so the Catholic monarchs, and it is also a social and critical tool that allow us to understand the anti-Semitism that were in place at that moment in space. Food is no longer simply represented as an ingredient, because we understand that food and food practices were used to mock the converso practices and to identify Jewish families for thanks to the way they decided to eat or not to eat. So this is what we are going to focus on. I'm going to show you a bit what we can learn from this. So maybe the first thing we should mention is, so nowadays, where can we find archives that highlight, that contains, in fact, those Inquisition trial in Spain? Now, we are, in one way, we are sometimes lucky because, for example, in Spain, even if the archives from the Inquisition that are related to Andalusia were totally burned, we can find archives of the Inquisition in the Canary Islands. This is one of the Canary Islands contains one of the more complete archives concerning the Inquisition. And also we have a lot of church that in Spain does, I don't know if it works like this in Portugal, but I assume that's the same. Some church in Spain do not want to open their doors, even if we know that they still have they are still keeping some archives from the Inquisition. So it's very hard. What was very useful to me what is very useful to me when I have to work on Inquisition trials is to go to Archivo General de la Nación, so the archives that are in Madrid, because they know that we can learn a lot from this, and they are not very open, but they are quite open for and they let us an access to work on this. Nevertheless, this is a different word from, if we compare this situation to the United States of America, which are very, very, very open, and they have a lot of Inquisition trials from Spain, from Mexico, from Portugal, a lot of big and famous universities, both some archives from the Inquisition, and are just waiting for people from scholars who can come and do some research on this. So personally, online, you can also find, as we all know here, a lot of Inquisition Inquisition trials. So this is very helpful. So in this kind of Inquisition trial, I decided to focus on the food and the food practices. Maybe people do not think that in Inquisition trial we can understand what was the cuisine of the Jews, of the converted Jews. Nevertheless, I spent a lot of time working on this, and obviously we have information concerning religious practices, but we learn a lot from the food, as food was used as a tool by the power to identify converso families. And they knew a lot, the inquisitors and the informers knew a lot concerning all the Jewish holidays and all the Jewish practices. And this is why as they knew a lot concerning this, it was easier for them to denounce converso families. That's why those Inquisition trials are of an immeasurable value. On the other side, they left like a written trace. This is something, it's a bit weird to say that thanks to Inquisition trial, we have information concerning food practices, but this is the case. The Inquisition trial allows us to understand a lot concerning the food practices. So just to be clear, in the Inquisition trials, we only can find a few information concerning entire recipes. In some case, you have the name of a dish, like huevos jamados or huevos jaminados. You have also the name of adefina, or jamín, or aní, or trasnochado, or olla reposada. In fact, all those names are adefina, jamín, aní, trasnochado, olla reposada, as are in fact the same dish, but this dish bears a lot of different names. It was a way to despite the informers. Nevertheless, the informers knew a lot concerning this. So, and you have information concerning unleavened breads. Those are almost and only, in fact, the 3 dishes that bear a name. All the information you can have concerning food are in relation only with food. I mean, the name of an ingredient. So unleavened bread, for example, I'm going to talk about this a bit after. But for example, concerning the unleavened bread, I say unleavened bread instead of using the term matzah, because in Inquisition trials, you will never find the name matzah. It's always refers to unleavened bread. So this is very interesting, because at the first time I was quite surprised. I was sure that I was going to find the term matzah mentioned in the Inquisition trials, but I did not find. But the term pan cencenio, pan cotazo, pan alice, in fact, it were used to refer to this bread that was made not only for Passover, but for a lot of Jewish holidays. So, and concerning the ingredients that are mainly mentioned in Inquisition trial as a way to identify the food practices of the converted Jews, you have first olive oil. Olive oil because the Christians use lard instead. And I found clear references concerning the fact that this family was identified as Jewish because the woman refused to make her dish using lard, as she decided to use olive oil. So she and her family was identified as Jewish. One of the second ingredient is garlic. So Sephardic family used a lot of garlic in their dishes. And because of the smell, we all know here that when you fry garlic, it smells very strong. I love this smell, but it seemed that the Christian did not love this. So it was easier for them to identify the Jewish families for, in fact, the smell that was spreading. Third element, third ingredient is eggplant. The relation between eggplant and the Jews is very, very, very strong. Because, and this is something that we can find in, that is in fact highlighting already in the 13th century. So there is very strong and meaningful relation between the Jews and eggplant. But what is interesting is that eggplant was used for his versatility. So the aubergine, we say, so eggplant aubergine was used for the flesh. It was used also as a way to, the flesh was used to shape the dish, because they wanted to show that in fact it was meat, but it was not. So it was a way just to despite the informers. We know that they were eggplant lovers. We have a lot of references where the Jews are mocked for eating a lot of eggplant. And this is something that you can find a lot in literature, but also obviously in here in Inquisition trials. So garlic, olive oil, eggplant are the three main ingredients. You have also references concerning meat and the way that the Jews prepare the meat, as they decided to they removed the tendon, so they were identified as Jewish, because the other families did not have to do this. So garlic, olive oil, eggplant. Concerning the dishes that bear a name, you have all the unleavened bread made with, for example, obviously with flour, but also with chestnut flour, made with chickpea flour, and obviously without any leavening inside. You have the huevos ramados, but the main and iconic Sephardic dish at that time, the one who is mentioned in a huge amount of Inquisition trial, is adefina. This one is really iconic. So just a very quick reminder. Adefina comes from the Arabic, that means dafud, madfun, so something that is buried, because the dish was prepared in a pot and then it was just buried, I mean covered, so nobody could just see it. Chamin is also a term from the Arabic, and it refers to something hot. Trasnochado, anis are the same. Trasnochado, so it's during all the night. So something that was cooked all night, during all the night. Olla reposada, it's that the same. I mean, a pot that was cooked for a long time. So reposada means that you did not have to move it and to add anything. This is the iconic dish for Shabbat, and only for Shabbat. But this is also a reason why this is the one who is the most mentioned in Inquisition trial, because Shabbat is every week. So as a celebration that you have to celebrate every week. So you have this iconic dish, and this is totally logical that this dish, as it was prepared every week for Shabbat, was the one who was the most mentioned in Inquisition trial. So yes. So those Inquisition trials revealed hidden practices. When I talk about the hidden practices, I mean that the families, the crypto-Jewish families, had to hide their practices because of the denunciers. There were informers everywhere. So they had to hide their practices, or they have to find ways to continue to practice and continue to consume their food without revealing their Judaism. For example, let's talk about spoons and pots. You have Inquisition trials that clearly mention that the servant had to prepare two pots. One, how to identify the two pots. Why two pots? Because the pot for the servant that contains pork and lard, and the other one with no pork, no lard, nothing that was nothing that was non-kosher. And how to identify the two pots? Because the woman asked the servant to use, in the first one, a spoon made with wood, and the other one, a spoon made with another kind of metal, for example. Concerning what is the other information we can find in Inquisition trial, we have a lot of information concerning the women that used to gather in one home, at one home, and they used to eat the pot on Saturday noon, a pot that was prepared on Friday. And they were denounced because they used to gather only women in one and only in single house to eat together. And they used to eat a dish that was cold. And for the informers, this was the evidence that all those women were Jewish, because they did not eat the dish that they were about to eat. Obviously, all the servants were women, because women denouncing other women, because who was in the kitchen? A woman. I'm sure as well that everybody knows what an Inquisition trial looks like. Nevertheless, I think it's always very interesting to share this. So this is an Inquisition trial I am still working on. This one dates back to 1484. So as we know, the first sentence against a Jewish family, so the first time that the court of the Inquisition started to work was in 1481. So we are here just 3 years after the very beginning of the court of the Inquisition in Spain, in the city of Seville. That, by the way, this court of the Inquisition nowadays, it's a disaster, because there is also almost nothing to discover. It's just crazy. It's like nobody knows about this place, which is really in Seville, in downtown Seville. So we are here at the very beginning of the Inquisition in Spain, so 1484. We are not in Seville, in Andalusia, but we are in Toledo, Spain. Toledo that has a very large and well-known Jewish community. I've been working, and I'm still working on this manuscript that which I found, in fact, at the University of Pennsylvania. And you may see, so it's like in the middle, so auto de fe del año 1494. So this is in the middle of the trial. And you can see, so for example, at the So at the bottom of the manuscript, you can see, so Doña Leonora, por ceremonias judaicas, so it's the trial of a woman called Leonora, and she was sentenced because she used to have to celebrate Jewish ceremonies. And in this trial, you have the evidence of the consumption and the preparation of chamin. So amin or chamin, that's the same. So the iconic Shabbat dish. You have the same here on the left manuscript. And this is one of the oldest we have. See, yes, just something is which is not in relation with food, but if you can just see on the right, this is something that is very special because, as you know, when we are reading an Inquisition trial, you are like reading, discovering the life of someone. Most of the time, this is the life of a woman, and as we all know here, the first decades of the Inquisition in Spain were the worst. And sometimes you're just reading, okay, so what is going to happen to this woman? And for example, if you just see on the folio on the right, so you can read that, so porque judía, no, so she was sentenced because she was Jewish, and because she used to celebrate Jewish practices, and at the end it's just written burnt. So when it's very, you can be very shocked about this. So I'm going to show you something else here. Okay. So as you can see here, okay, you have another Inquisition trial that dates back to almost 1 century. Yes, after, so 1581. Here you have the evidence of the making of adefina. So, but you have exactly the ingredients to make the adefina, and we can learn that this adefina used meat, carne con perejil, so meat and parsley, and berzas. Berzas, it's Swiss chard. Cebollas, so onions, and hierbabuena. Hierbabuena is mint. So we have evidence concerning what were the ingredients used to make adefina. So this is on the part here in the green. Okay, it's quite easy to just to understand. And it's written that this pot was put on the, under the fire just to be cooked. You have also the mention of one dish which is called guesmo, and it has, for example, so berenjenas, so this is eggplant, cilantrillo, so this is cilantro, alcaravera, this is a lot of other ingredients, cumin, black pepper, and onions, and a lot of spices, and this was called guesmo. This is something that nowadays some of our Sephardic communities used to prepare. This was prepared for Shabbat as well. This is not a relation with oh, what's happened? Okay, so here there is no relation with Inquisition trial, but just wanted to show you that, for example, the Diccionario de Autoridades, so this is a dictionary that dates back to the 18th century, mentioned in the word adefina in the dictionary, and in this dictionary we have the evidence that this adefina was identified and known as cierto género de guisado que guisaban los judíos de España. So one kind of pot that the Jews of Spain used to prepare. So it was clearly identified, adefina was clearly identified as a Jewish dish. And we all know that nowadays adefina is still our Shabbat dish. So this is this recipe can be found in my cookbook, because I cannot just make a cookbook, Sephardi cookbook, without highlighting the existence of adefina. So it's a pot that contains chickpeas and also meat and huevos ramados, so eggs in their shell, olive oil, a lot of garlic, and it's cooked from Friday to Saturday noon without adding anything. Everybody knows about this. Here, just wanted to talk about other Inquisition trials. So the one on the left dates back to the 16th century, the end of the 16th century. It's quite easy to understand, but my attention goes to the two ones on the right. So on the right, you have ones that, in fact, both are from Mexico. The first one tells us about the making of matzah. So obviously, as I told you, the word matzah is not mentioned, but you have exactly, and this is one of my favorite, because you have here the clear evidence that matzah was made, and you have also the prayer to make the matzah, and also the ingredients to make the matzah, and also the relevance not to add any leaven for the matzah because we have to remember Passover, and we have to celebrate Passover and to remember what happened to our ancestors. And this is totally clear, and this is for me one of the best representation of our food practices and transmission. The one in the middle is also dates back to so this one at the beginning of the 17th century, and highlight the making of one dish made with chickpeas, eggs, fish, tuna, and in a box that also contain candles. So this dish was placed in a large box, and in this large box you can also find candles. So we really understand that this dish was sent to someone to celebrate Shabbat. Okay, so huevos ramados, this is this. So huevos ramados are so the onions that you can place directly in the pot to make the adefina, but also you can cook them in the peels of red onions, and this gives to the egg white, but also to the shell, this very dark color, and inside the egg white is now totally brown, and it's creamy, and it's very good. So just to finish this, I wanted to talk about what I discovered. This is the first time I talk about this. I will do very quickly. I got a fellowship from the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia in the United States. I spent a bit more than 5 weeks working in the archives of the University of Pennsylvania. So a few months ago, and it was one of my best experience. I've been working on Inquisition trials that have never been discovered. So nobody knows about this. And my goal was to find new information concerning the food practices of the Sephardic from Spain or from Portugal. And I discovered one, which is a trial which is totally fascinating, because the main ingredient is pork, or in fact, not pork, it's the lack of pork. And why pork was so important, why not eating pork was so important for Jewish families. So it's the story of a woman that is going to be sentenced and judged by the Inquisition. And it's the story of her and her family and her husband, who obviously does not understand anything concerning what is happening. And obviously, it seems that he does not know, honestly, that his wife is Jewish. So it's like a combination of, in fact, it's very special. So in this trial of that this was this woman, you understand how pork and the lack of pork and the theme of pork is so important for the people. Not eating pork, not eating lard was very relevant and very meaningful for those for this woman during this period. I mean, it's like the middle of the 16th century. We understand the key role played by this ingredient to in the way to prove that she was not a Christian, but she says that she is Christian. But it's very special because the trial is it's a huge trial. It contains almost 150 pages, folios, and I did not finish, so I don't know what is going to happen to this woman. But she refused to tell the denuncier and the inquisitors that she is a crypto Jew, and she says that she has no relation with Judaism, that she is a good Christian, and the way to prove that she's a good Christian is that her husband eats pork. But the announcer said that, informer says that even she said that her husband eats pork, she always refused to eat pork. So she is Jewish. So it's very special, it's very complex, but nevertheless, what the goal here is to understand that food is a tool for the power, for the Christian power to identify who was Jewish and who was not. I'm going to end with this. For example, so you have here, so the 3 books I wrote. So the first is Sephardi, then you have a book of history, so Jews, food, and Spain, and the last one is Matzah and Flour. Just to keep in mind that Jewish holidays highlight the permanence of the dishes and the evolution of the practices. So Jewish holidays are what allow the transmission of practices, and including food practices. That's why, as Shabbat is a celebration that we celebrate every week, and that our ancestors celebrated every week. This is the Jewish celebration that is mainly mentioned in Inquisition trial. The enunciation for Shabbat practices, food practices are everywhere. Then you have Passover. Why? Because Passover, the duration of the celebration of Passover is 1 week. So it was easier for the informers to denounce Jewish families for their practices, because it lasted for 8 days. Then you have Yom Kippur, but not a lot of trials mention Yom Kippur. Sukkot and Purim even less. We have also, because we are just Hanukkah is around the corner, so we have few information concerning Hanukkah practices. We have one, the most important deals with a woman, always woman, so called Maria Diaz. She was denounced for lighting 8 candles for Pascua de las Candeillas, so Easter of the little candles. and because as she lit night candles, so she was identified as Jewish, and she was lighting candles for Hanukkah. But we do not have a lot of information concerning this celebration. Just to hand, this is one of nowadays main food practice for Hanukkah, and this is also a dish. So it's like a bit donut. Moroccan Jews used to prepare sponge for Hanukkah, and just an information, this recipe dates back to the 13th century because it is mentioned in the first cookbooks that contain explicitly Jewish recipes, but it is not identified explicitly as a Jewish recipe. But nevertheless, nowadays, the Moroccan Jews used to prepare sponge for Hanukkah and only for this Jewish holiday. So here we are. So I hope you like the session. I'm sorry, my English is not, I'm a bit tired and my English, I'm not an English native speaker. So I hope it was good. And if you have any question, please feel free to ask.
Great, thank you very much. That was absolutely fascinating. Would you like to close your presentation?
Oh, yes, indeed.
Great. So I have several questions to start us off. You had the example of the woman who was accused of Judaizing, although her husband ate pork. But surely in many families, if a woman had, say, learnt to cook from her mother, and way back when her mother was Jewish or Muslim, or maybe just from the south, then maybe they were always cooking with olive oil. So is the fact of cooking with olive oil as a real indication of a Jewish connection?
Oh, yes, totally. And we have information concerning this practice. I mean, cooking with olive oil, and not only cooking, I mean, in the way of frying, but cooking in the way of using oil instead. In fact, it's using oil instead of using lard. So the fact of using olive oil in the dishes was and still is a Jewish food practice, and we have other evidences of this in, for example, a novel written in Spanish by a converso called Francisco Delicado, and this novel is The Lusty Andalusian Woman, and tells the story of a woman. She's from her family is from Andalusia, from Cordoba, and she fought Inquisition and decided to go with her husband to Rome in Italy. And what is totally surprising is that the woman, the Italian crypto-Jewish woman, because that who are there, ask the protagonist, so Aldonza, about her food practices. And one of the questions those women ask Aldonza from Spain is, okay, we are going to see how she used to make couscous, because if she uses olive oil, so we will know that she es de nostris, so she is like us. But if she uses water, so this means that she's not like us. So the novel only says if she uses olive oil, we will know if she's de nosotras, so like us. So yes, it's olive oil not only for frying, but I mean as a main ingredient for any fat that could be added to the dish.
Thank you. You also in the Arab recipe book, yes, you mentioned partridges as a Jewish dish, and I always I mean, I'm in England. I've always associated partridges with sort of aristocratic families, and hunting them and so forth. I suppose you can catch them with nets, but it seems quite strange that should be identified as a Jewish food.
Yes, in fact, it is identified. In fact, this, if you look at this partridge, as those two partridge dishes, they did not seem to have something especially Jewish. We do not know why this recipe is called Jewish. Nevertheless, what we are, and you are totally right with this. I mean, this is partridge was and still is a meat used for the elites of the society, so the very upper class of the society. Yeah. So nevertheless, I cannot say that those Jews were wealthy. We do not know about this, and this is the same for the other recipes, but I cannot say that there is a connection between partridge and the wealthy Jewish people who are, making this.
Thank you. And also I have a question from our friend Andre, who couldn't be here. He has to be working this evening. He's just asking if you found any references to rabbits in what you're writing, either eating or not eating. I mean, obviously a rabbit isn't kosher, but if you found any references to rabbits, because
you mean in Inquisition trial?
In with respect to food, in his family there's a family tradition to do connected with rabbits. He was just curious if
yes, I have. The only one I have is not mentioned in an Inquisition trial, but is mentioned in the first cookbook, so the 13th century, in the 13th century, because just very briefly, so this cookbook has been written in the 13th century in Andalusia, Spain, in a very, very bad context for the Jews, because this is when the second dynasty of the Berber Almohads, they had a very dogmatic view of Islam. So this is exactly at this moment that this first cookbook was written, but nevertheless, we can find 6 explicit Jewish recipes. So it was like, it seems to be logical that because of the context, this cookbook was written by a Muslim for Muslims.
Yes.
But nevertheless, first of all, we have 6 explicit Jewish recipes. Second, it seems that the author knew a lot concerning kosher practices. And third, we have a recipe of rabbit. I mean, in the title, it's in Arabic, it's a dish of rabbit. Nevertheless, this dish does not contain any grams of rabbit. Okay. It contains eggplant.
Okay.
So, and the Muslims are totally allowed to eat rabbit. So why would it be a recipe with a rabbit dish, a rabbit recipe with no rabbit, if the Muslims are allowed to eat rabbit?
Yes, it's strange.
Yes, totally.
Great. Thank you. Ton.
I have one question. I assume that you're reading Inquisition trials yourself, online or in an archive. Do you need to read the whole file to get what you want?
This is a good question. When I got when I knew that I got the fellowship to work at Penn Archives, obviously they asked me to come because they needed someone to read the manuscript. So when I started to read, obviously I had no idea concerning what I was going to discover. I was just finger crossed to discover something concerning food and Sephardic practices. So the answer is yes. I have to read the entire trial to understand this, because it's a trial. So it has this strong organization. And if you cannot just pick a moment in the manuscript to understand. This is totally, and this is a nonsense, because you would not be able to understand what is happening. Because, for example, I take just an example. So if you just take a moment of the trial, it says, so I am going to say that he is wrong because he said that I did this, but I did not. And if you do not read the very beginning, you cannot get this. You cannot get what is happening. And this is why it takes so much time. I spent five weeks there in the archives at Penn, and during the first week, working like 10 hours per day, I just read, because I did not know. I was just hoping that I was going to discover something, and I was so lucky to discover this very incredible trial.
Yes, you must be aware of the work of Chaim Benar. He published some of these trials in a 3-volume edition.
Oh yes, wonderful work.
And did you also find references to food in them?
Oh yes, indeed. Yes, Chaim Benard, you have, yes, I think I have all the books of him. Yes,
Okay.
yes, I think that when we are working on Inquisition trial from Spain, in my case, or Mexico, because I'm also working on the Mexican one, you cannot work without reading Chaim Benard. So it's very helpful. But nowadays, this is one of my goals. I mean, with the trial I am working on, because I'm still working on I'm still working on the trial that I started working on when I was at Penn. But my goal here is to publish this as Chaim Benard did. I mean, to transcribe it in Spanish, to offer, and what my goal is to transcribe the entire trial in Spanish, in a modern Spanish, or I don't know, maybe I don't know what I'm gonna do, and to also to offer an English translation of this, and to offer an edition, a critical edition of this, because it's like a movie, and it's really, really interesting. It's
Nice.
Oh yes.
I'm part of the initiative Anasao Hebraica. We use Transcribus to transcribe mostly the London archives of Versus Marx. But we also tried it at some Inquisition stuff from Portugal. And we did some 30 pages, and the results are fabulous.
Oh, really?
Yes. So if you want to learn about using Transcribus, you're welcome to join our groups or to attend one or two of our sessions.
Oh yes, please. I don't know if you can just email me all those details. Maybe I could be of any help, and maybe we can work on things. Everything is
Yes.
interesting, so
Yes.
we have so much work to do.
Too much work.
Oh yeah.
What we need for Transcribus is high quality digital images. And I believe that Spain is not very good at digitizing its holdings. They do so on request, and you have to pay for it.
Exactly.
While Portugal has thousands of Inquisition files for free online.
Yes.
Yeah, so could you influence them to have a more open?
You know what? I
Digitizing.
wish I could, because I know very well about this situation. I've been asking a lot of different organizations to give me an access, I mean, to give me an online access, and sometimes they do not answer me. They give me like wrong links. I call them and they don't want to answer. In Spain, it's very, very weird. Really, really, it's like it's easier to work in trials, in Spanish Inquisition trials that are not kept in Spain, that to work in Inquisition in Spanish Inquisition trials that are kept in Spain. This is just crazy. This is crazy. So the only ones I am, the one I am currently working on is in Archivo General de la Nación, so in Madrid, and I know exactly the trial I am working on. So, but I went there and I spent like 2.5 hours only just filling out papers to have the access to this. But this happened to me also in Mexico, where I spent 3.5 hours, and at the end, I saw nothing.
I was once in Madrid asking for a file, and then it turned out that they had it on microfilm.
Oh yeah, that's happened to me as well, and we are so disappointed, right?
Okay, Bernard, can you unmute yourself?
Thank you, first of all, Hélène, for all the work that you've done so far. And it sounds like we've got to thank you in advance for all the work you're going to do. It's fascinating. And can I just ask, as a general question, have you actually prepared meals from recipes or from descriptions, if not actual recipes, in the Inquisition records? And how successful have they been? And comment about archives in Spain.
So, excellent question. I have been able to recreate the recipes, not all the recipes, but the recipes that are in my cookbooks. Yes, I recreated them, because even if we do not have even if in the Inquisition trial you do not have the amount of ingredients, sometimes you can find information concerning how the dish would look like. You also have information concerning the time of the for the cooking time, and sometimes it's, in fact, they are not very elaborated dishes. They are mainly pots, so you just have to follow. Okay, we know, okay, you have this pot, and we saw that in this pot there was water, there was herbs, and also, so it's like a list of ingredients, and at the end everything is cooked, and the more important is what you do not have to put inside, and also the cooking time. So, and then obviously I'm also a cook, and I'm a chef for very Orthodox Jewish families, so I know about this, but I always my goal is always to be to keep, in fact, the original ingredients. I always keep the original ingredients, and I always be as close as the original information I can have in the Inquisition trial. But the other way I also do is to, as you know, you work in Inquisition trial, but the Inquisition trials cannot be your only source, because as we know, we have a huge diaspora, and Inquisition trials are not the only sources that deal with food. Novels, medical treatises, Inquisition trials from other countries, like all the countries of the Sephardim, we are going to say. The most important is the period. Obviously, you are not going to eat the same in the 14th century and in the 16th century. So you have to be very careful about this. But sometimes, for example, you have information concerning and this is post discovery of America, you have information concerning one dish that you can find information in Inquisition trial, and this same dish you can also find information in novels. And thanks to you have to gather all the information you can have in different kinds of sources, and this is how you can rebuild the dish, thanks to what you can find in other sources more than the Inquisition trial. Everywhere, in fact.
That sounds really valuable. I went to a Zoom talk a couple of years ago by a professor from Madrid, who I think done a cookbook based on recipes and food descriptions that he'd taken from denunciations in Inquisition trials. And he said that one of the accusations that was made that people were Jewish or Judaizing was because they were using ingredients that were new from the New World. In other words, things like potatoes, that it was considered to be un-Christian to be using potatoes which were not part of traditional cuisine. I don't know whether or not you've come across that in any of the denunciations.
Honestly, absolutely not. That's the first time I hear about this. And
I will find his name and email it to you, because I think it might be interesting to know.
Yes, it would be interesting, because I've been working on Inquisition trial that dates back to the very beginning of the 15th century. I'm also working on Inquisition trial from the 15th, 16th, and sometimes 17th, but it's very late for me. And I never heard about this, and I never find the word potato or something like this. So the only ingredient, but the relevance was not the ingredient, was the way of making, because the savoir-faire and the process is sometimes more important than the ingredient itself. It deals with chocolate. I wrote an article which is in the process of being published, I hope in a few weeks, and deals with chocolate and between religious practices and trade, and it highlights how the Jews, the Sephardim from Mexico, used to include drinking chocolate for their religious practices. And this is something they brought when they came back to Spain and France. And this was totally new, because the ingredient was new, but it was more the process. It was the process of eating chocolate and the drinking of chocolate with those other ingredients that make this very special, and that allow people to know more about that the guy was Jewish. But this thing with potatoes, that's the first time I heard from this.
I will find it and send you the reference. And I just wanted to say on the question of archives and digitizing, I this week had an experience with Spain where I wanted to refer somebody. This is nothing to do with Sephardic research, it's to do with architecture and planning. But I was looking for an online version of a publication that I was involved with in the 1970s in Spain, and couldn't find one anywhere. Going through Spanish library references, I found hard copies in half a dozen libraries. And I ended up phoning the College of Architects in Barcelona and saying, okay, I'm going to scan this so that I can let other people have it. Would you like a copy? And they were so grateful. I don't think they had ever thought, although they have a hard copy, they'd never thought of digitizing it. So for some reason, the attitude to digitizing in Spain is very different from France or Portugal or Italy or certainly from Holland. So it's also a plea, anybody who's got anything in Spanish that they can't find online, scan it and let libraries in
Yeah.
Spain, bodies in Spain have a copy.
I totally agree with this, and I hope to be wrong in what I am going to tell you, but I was also wondering if it's not a way. I mean, this those issues concerning digitalization of Inquisition trials. I'm also thinking if it's not something that it is done on purpose. I mean, this complexity and this lack of recognition of the necessity of making of giving an access to work on Inquisition trial. I'm really wondering if this is not done obviously. You know what I mean? So they don't want us to work on this.
Yeah.
They don't want. So how can they do if they don't want us to let us an access to work on this? They do not give us an access. And they, so I think I hope I'm wrong in this. But sometimes when it's really, really hard, you just think about this, in this option.
In Portugal, most of the Inquisition records, wherever they came from, have ended up in the Torre de Tombo archive. So they are available and accessible to people both in the country and from abroad. But in Spain, there are still Inquisition records in every place that had an Inquisition center, and they haven't been centralized.
Oh, yes. I totally agree. I know about this. I totally agree. And I when I was a PhD candidate, I remember that I called, I don't know what was, it was in Cuenca, and they clearly told me that they didn't want it to give me an access to this. And they had part, not the entire Inquisition trial, but they had part of the Inquisition trial, and I knew that it was there. And so I told them, okay, you know what? It's on my way to go home in Spain, in Andalusia, so I'm gonna stop here. And they told me, no, you cannot. And we won't let you an access to this. So, in fact, this is not surprising. And but this is a big issue, and this make me very, very angry, because it's like to hide our history. And then, in fact, this is totally logical when you understand. There is nothing surprising when you just try to understand what is happening in Spain right now. When you want to understand, you just want to talk about Jewish history, and people don't want to talk about this, or don't want to how many times I went to Spain, well, it's my country, but how many times I went there and just tried to talk to people, and all they were scared, or the other non-Jewish people didn't want to talk about this, and they even didn't want to recognize this. And if you go to Seville, that's just crazy. You go to Seville. I was a guide with my friend Susan Barocas. So I was a guide there, and I knew as an historian that this place was an old synagogue. But if you go there, there is nothing that highlights the fact that there was a synagogue here. Everything is totally, hidden and everything. So
thank you.
Thank you for this heartfelt cry out. And I think we can conclude our meeting with this. No more questions. Maybe one more last question. No, then we close the meeting. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you to our patrons who make all of this possible, many of whom are here. And we hope to see you all in the next year. And our first speaker will be Mirjam Knotter of the Jewish Historical Museum of Amsterdam, and she will talk about Rembrandt and the Jews. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you so
And
much for having me.
festive
Thank you so
days,
much.
all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.